Welcome to Virtual Production for Cinematographers. Happy to be with you today, presented by Sigma Lenses, among other folks. I'm Jody Eldred. I'm a director and a cinematographer and a writer and a colorist as well, so I've pretty much made all the mistakes somebody can possibly make in this business. Joining me today is my longtime friend and colleague, Sam Nicholson ASC. Sam's the president and founder of Stargate Studios, where we are right at this very moment. Now, Sam has a very interesting career starting back 1979, Star Trek the Motion Picture. Was that kind of one of your first gigs? So when you saw that movie, you saw the big, gigantic warp drive, life-size thing. Well, that was his creation. Since then, their company has been doing visual effects for little bitty shows you probably never heard of, like Walking Dead, ER, Grey's Anatomy. So they do VFX as well as green screen. But in the past couple of years, Sam has really been a pioneer in the world of virtual production using the big, giant LED volumes. Is it safe and fair to say that you are indeed the technology that the Mandalorian is currently using, even though they're...
Sure.
Yeah, so that was kind of your
different,
stuff.
But similar.
Yeah. So we have some really pretty amazing things to share with you today and to show you. A video coming up pretty soon, something you will have never seen before because nobody's seen it yet. But we want to make this accessible for cinematographers. I mean, obviously visual effects people have, at least those who've been doing some virtual production, understand what's necessary to create the pre-production aspects and the production aspects that go into virtual production. But we want to make today particularly accessible to cinematographers, because I think at some point, almost all of us are going to be involved in virtual production. I mean, it is coming like a freight train, and it's already being used very extensively on lots of shows, big and small. So we want to make this accessible to folks who haven't had a chance to do it yet, but probably will be soon. So first, Sam, let me just ask you, oh, by the way, we have Bambi with us today. So
Very important.
Very important part, yeah.
Very important
She's a virtual dog. She looks real, but actually that is an LED dog that you're seeing right there. Very high resolution, I would say.
Yeah.
Very realistic. Yeah. How would you define virtual production? And in fact, I'll give you 20 minutes. I'm going to go get a sandwich.
Well, virtual production, first of all, has been around for a long time. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock was doing virtual production. He was just using rear projection. But the concept of bringing a location to the studio as opposed to going out on location has been around for quite some time. You know, visual effects, to a certain extent, I would consider them virtual production. I think virtual production has been branded as that because it is real time. So we're not talking about something which is processed off, months after the fact. Traditional green screen and CPU-based rendering, which is still around. I mean, it's not going away.
So the rear projection process shots that were done in camera, that would be considered virtual production, as opposed to green screen that we're comping it in later?
Well, you can do virtual production on green with real-time tools. An Ultimate is a real-time tool. We used Prevision for many years, doing shows like Pan Am and Beauty and the Beast, where we would see what we could do live, right? And so it's been, the virtual production has been coming for quite a few years. Now with the intersection of the technologies, specifically LED, GPU-based game engines, Unreal and Unity, and digital cinematography, and LED lighting, you put all those things together in real time, and you've got a very powerful ability like this to put a background in real time and have it perspective shift and do all the things that the real world does. So Alfred Hitchcock obviously did not have motion tracking. It works from a single perspective. If you're going to dolly around and move and crane and really get into it, that's where today's virtual production really excels, because then you track the volume with your camera. You know the XYZ coordinates of your perspective, and the image changes appropriately to keep your horizon and all of your perspectives. If it's a game engine, it is literally re-rendering it on the fly through another intersecting technology, which is the NVIDIA, A6000 cards, really. So, we're talking about walls that are 20K horizontal resolution. So,
By the way, did you hear that? 20K horizontal resolution. I just didn't want that to go flying by.
and the way you address that, we address it with 8K deck links and splitting it into multiples of synchronized 8K quadrants.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can build a screen out that is 200 feet, if you want. And or multiple screens. We use LED screens, we use OLED screens, very high resolution screens that are still large. Laser projection, synchronized lighting with DMX or ArtNet lights. Every one of these components is getting better really fast. The LED technology is changing immediately. The camera technology is changing immediately, very rapidly. The lights themselves, the colorimetry, all of these technologies, if you hook them together and you keep in mind real time, and specifically your assets need to be optimized to be able to, they must play back at least 24 frames per second.
Right.
Otherwise you have a big problem on set. So, we're going towards higher speed, like 48, 96, 120 frame playback. So, and when people say to me, where's it going to stop? I just say, it's going to stop when we get to reality. I mean,
Yeah. What is the resolution
there's
of
no
reality?
frame rate if you walk outside, and so, this idea that it's not just resolution, and this is, Franz Krauss at Alexa or at Arri used to have these conversations about, at what point is too much resolution not necessary in today's market? Do you need 8K? Do you need 12K, like the Blackmagic cameras? Do you need a 20K camera? Who thought that we would have digital cameras that would be up in the 100 megapixel area like the Fuji camera, or I love the Sonys we're shooting a lot with the A1s.
Yeah.
So the thing about virtual production is that you're creating a universe, whether it's photographic or 3D or whatever, you're creating a world, you're world building. And then you're going in and exploring that world with actors on set. It's like virtual reality without a headset. And the cameras, multiple cameras, are viewports into that virtual world, which is reality, maybe 2.5D, then 3D, and 2D all the way out at the horizon, whatever. So a lot of different formulas for this. It's like, what's the perfect recipe for Chinese food? I mean, there's 10 billion recipes, right? And it's the same thing's happening in virtual production. A lot of different recipes and a lot of different approaches. The Mandalorian is one. Our Flag Means Death is another. The work that we do with ABC on Station 19, we do all the driving virtually, real time. Looks great. Looks way better than green screen because of all the reflective surfaces and whatnot in a fire engine. And it works financially and on a series schedule. But it's a different scale than what we're doing here on our Flag, which is an extremely large wall, 165 feet, 20K, 30 feet high, for HBO. And with no weighting and multiple cameras. Taika is a brilliant comedic director.
Taika Waititi, for the two of you watching who don't know who that is. He won the Oscar for Jojo Rabbit for writing and also directed and starred in that. And stars
he's
in
Blackbeard.
This.
So
yeah, so we're going to give you a little teaser for that.
Any of you who haven't watched it, watch it. It's funny, and it's about 50% virtual, which was a major challenge. We've been upping the ante with HBO for many years on shows like Run and other virtual productions where they, oh, can you do this? Okay, if you can do that, then can you do this? And then if you did that, can you do this? And this was, can you be on set in 6 weeks from start? So you don't have time to render a bunch of assets or anything. You just got it. You're going to be on set.
That's right.
And
speaking of being on set, there's the air conditioning kicking on. So those of you at home doing this, make sure your AC is turned off while listening to this, because it'll distract you otherwise.
Can't do much about that right now.
And I'm happy to have that, actually.
That's the live,
This is live.
the beauty of live. But so schedule and budget is always a consideration, because it seems like everybody wants to talk about virtual production or anything new in a theoretical vacuum. You look at a lot of virtual production demonstrations and it's one camera.
Right.
I've never been on a shoot with one camera. You have 2, 3 cameras, and they all have to be seeing something perfect.
Yep. And it's all got to look exactly like real life.
Yeah, and look, there are many different types. You can do 2 frustrums in a game show or whatever and get away with it with just rendering in the portion that the camera sees. But what our goal was to have a 165-foot wraparound screen on a pirate ship where you could look anywhere in the volume with any number of cameras at any time and roll as long as you wanted to, as if it was real. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve, is to get it as close to reality as possible, but without the barriers to entry, like you're on the water out in the middle of the ocean and it's raining. And we did that, but we did it with a very small crew shooting all the water plates. And then we brought the ocean in Puerto Rico, which you were there. We brought it to the soundstage at Warner Brothers and took that whole problem out of shooting on the water. So we shot for 14 weeks on a soundstage, and you would swear that we're on the water.
Oh, yeah. I remember Randall Kleiser, who directed The Blue Lagoon and Grease, among other things, being here when we were doing some of the tests for Our Flag Means Death. And he was like, I wished we'd have had this technology when I did The Blue Lagoon, because we spent weeks and weeks and weeks at sea. And I've seen Sam do stuff here in an hour on this virtual set that would have taken us a week. Because it's, when you're shooting on the ocean, the clouds go by and the ocean goes from turquoise blue to gray and then back again, and shadows and so forth. When you're doing virtual work like this, we can shoot a sunset, and we can shoot on a stage at golden hour all day long. So you're not confined to 15 or 20 minutes. We just rerun that footage and keep doing it over and over. This is probably a good time to give the world premiere of this little video, don't you think, Sam?
Sure.
So we want to show you a never seen before behind the scenes from Taika Waititi's new HBO Max comedy series, Our Flag Means Death, and how Sam did it. So let's have a look.
What we're looking at here is a composite image of 5 Blackmagic 12Ks that are on a stabilized head, rock solid. It has been comped at 60K and then reduced into an 8K spread that we then put an anamorphic squeeze on and then de-squeeze it when we get to set. The idea is having the parallax of a boat, which is you're on a boat, but it's as steady as if you were shooting from land. At Stargate, we've been exploring various aspects of virtual production for the past few years, both fully computer generated and photographed. We tend to take impossible projects and make them possible. It's complex problem solving to the extreme. We started conducting tests for this particular project over a year ago, working with smaller screens, working with footage and CG ships and all sorts of things to really get our feet on the ground and establish an idea of how to shoot it, how to manage the data, and what we could depend on when we scaled it up on set. The display that this is all going on to is, I think, the biggest LED wall that has been done to date. 30 feet high by 165 feet wide. We were on a remote location in Puerto Rico on boats and on beaches and all over the map. And we had systems like Ronin heads, a lot of different camera rigs for stabilization. And the Sigma lenses work perfectly on every one of those rigs. When we're shooting for these large-scale volumes, having a lens which has the characteristics of the Sigma lens, the sharpness, lack of chromatic aberration, no breathing, in a very economical and lightweight package, really, gives us the ability to project enormous images that are really connected to good virtual production. You know, the lenses are, I think, really gaining popularity, particularly with the ASC members. I know that Claudio Miranda has done some fabulous work with them, and we're coming at it more from a visual effects standpoint, and resolution is always key to us, whether we're shooting with a Blackmagic 12K or 8K Reds or 8K Sonys now. The lenses work with all those cameras, so having, you know, look, at the end of the day, an investment in good glass is a smart move. Sigma really supports their customer base really well. So if there is ever any problem or any additional lenses that you need or whatever, they're right there for you. And I think that's a big part of the success of any hardware is the support group behind it. So that's Sigma. After many years in this business, I think you need to have hardware partners that support you in the look that you want to get and really help you achieve your creative goals as well as your technical goals. And again, Sigma comes through on every one of those levels.
Well, gotta love live TV. That actually was not the video we intended to show you. We're trying to scare that up right now. This is live TV, folks. You know, Sam has run back to see if he can find that other video that we really do want you to see. And if not, it's going to be up online. It'll be archived. You'll be able to see it on Sigma's website as well as Red Shark News. By the way, thank you, Red Shark News, for coming alongside us today. So what you saw there, and we couldn't even, at the time, we couldn't even mention that it was Taika Waititi or Our Flag Means Death. But now it's become such a big hit series that we've got the green light and we can actually talk about this. So what you saw was how we went about capturing the images and the plates that they're using for Our Flag Means Death. So you saw a very scaled down version of that on a stage at Warner Brothers. They built an LED wall that is 165 feet wide by 30 feet tall. And in front of it, they built a life-size pirate ship on a gimbal. And that's where they had been shooting almost all of the scenes for this that are exteriors. Now, they did a little bit of practical stuff, I think up in Malibu on the beach, but 99% of it, all the ocean, all the sky, all that stuff, that's all stuff that Sam and his team from Stargate captured in Puerto Rico last year on a couple of different trips. So it's pretty amazing. There are people who have seen this that have said, I had no idea and I would never have guessed in a million years that that was not actual ocean and actual sky. Sam, you're back. What did you find out, buddy?
Yeah, no, we've got the reel we expected up.
Oh, good.
We'll have it in a
Yeah, so just let us know when that's up. So, I mean, seriously, this is live TV.
Yeah.
So I just was telling everybody that what they saw was the behind the scenes is how we went out and shot that stuff. So what you're going to see in a little bit. Yes, it's a very good prep. So what you'll see in a little bit is the actual, how they actually executed this. And while we're waiting for that to queue up, it occurs to me that for a cinematographer, there's two aspects to this. One is capturing those plates, which we just saw in there, going to the locations, shooting whatever it may be, whether it's cityscapes or ocean, day, night, various types of weather. So there's that aspect that a cinematographer needs to be prepared for, and that's something that you really specialize in and do excellent. And then the other part of it is when you're on the set and you're actually, now we're shooting the movie or we're shooting the episodic series, and we're seeing that screen behind us. So there's that aspect of it too. And there are frequently different cameras and lenses used to capture the plates, versus cameras and lenses that are used on the set. Would you say that's an accurate depiction?
What we're looking at
When we go out to shoot, we're generally a much smaller crew, and we have a lot of cameras. So we have 9, 10 cameras simultaneous. So, you know, if you have a $50,000 lens times 9, that's a non-starter.
Yes.
You know, so we have to take into account the cost versus the quality, really. And I think that, by the way, that's one of the reasons why the Sigma lenses have been great for us.
Yep.
Because they are very sharp. It's a relatively neutral lens, so it can match to almost any other lens. So we don't dictate what the first unit will shoot on set. If they want to use ingenues, the Sigmas can match to them quite nicely. If they want to use master primes, they'll match to those. And so Sigma was fantastic to support us during the shoot.
And we also were able to use both their Cine lenses, their zooms, and their ART lenses, which are designed for stills cameras. So they're different sizes, different form factors. Yeah,
Well,
I was
I'm
very
a
happy.
big fan of mixing the best tool for the purpose. And, you know, if you do a blind test and you just look at the footage from all the lenses, all the cameras, you have to pick the right one for any particular job. And it changes. You know, if it's a night job, I really like to use the Sony Alpha 1s because they are incredible in low light. They just, beautiful lenses.
How high ISO were you running? Do you remember?
We're running night footage at ASA 32,000. So,
And doing a lot of noise reduction or no?
Then we're blowing it up on a 90, 100-foot wall.
Wow.
And it looks great. Now, I haven't seen any camera that will do that. Now, the Venice 2 will. But then you look at we needed 9 6K cameras.
Yeah, the Pocket Cinema Camera 6Ks.
And the beauty of the 6Ks is that we could put them through the ATEM Extreme switcher and see all of them and fire all of them at once.
And they all had synchronized time code as well. Push one button, everything rolls.
Yeah,
That's a
so,
huge deal.
Which saves you a tremendous amount in post. I mean, Stargate is a post-production house as well. We have visual effects, editorial, all that good stuff. And if you come in with a bag of footage without matching time code, they'll you'll lose a tremendous amount of money and time just trying to figure out what the heck we shot.
And did we come back from Puerto Rico with like 100 terabytes or something from that first shoot?
200.
200 terabytes.
200 terabytes.
Matching time code is kind of important.
So 200 terabytes, you arrive and say, okay, we need this tomorrow. You know, everybody's very anxious to see it. The shoot is coming. And we have to see the footage right away.
Yes.
Now, you can't look at it in 8K. You can't look at it in 6K. You certainly can't look at it at 20K.
And plus, we're on location. We're in Puerto Rico, and you got producers in New York or LA like, hey, we need to see this.
Yeah. So there's a high level of anxiety at that point because the one thing they don't talk about in virtual production is that it's a complete flip of the business model. It's big money being spent before you've even started shooting.
Yes.
Because if you don't prepare your assets and understand that this is just like production design, nobody would expect to give a production designer a week of time and have the Palace of Versailles built on stage, right? So if you want to build something, everybody gets that because it's physical. What they don't understand is the limitations of the virtual world. It takes almost as much time to build a good virtual set as it does a real set.
And that all has to be in place on the day when you're shooting, not like green screen, where you shoot green screen, later we'll create those assets and do that in post.
Yeah.
This all has to be done in pre so that it happens on the day.
And you can literally walk onto a set with wet paint and just tell the actors don't lean up against that wall, right? You can't do that in digital because a big part of our process and the reason why what we call through view is successful is that we integrate and test everything before we get to on set. And at that point, you really know it's going to work. And that's just, that peace of mind. If you don't have that time to test, if the producers aren't going to give you that time, then you should. Here,
We're being
I'll
attacked by
get this
wild
guy.
animals.
Come
Not
here.
virtual animals either.
I've got to chase her around.
This
here,
is
so-
Stargate Studios.
Come on, babe.
Kids.
Come on.
Hey, you know
Bambi.
what? We've got that video.
Bambi will
They're telling
pass
me
it.
the video is ready. So let's
Okay.
let's run that. So
All
now,
right.
as I said before,
All right.
the world premiere
All
of
right.
Behind the Scenes, Our Flag Means Death.
If we've got it, let's
Enjoy.
if we got it, let's look at it.
Here we are on the set of The Revenge, a great new show, Our Flag Means Death, from HBO Max. And what's unique about this show is that we are in a virtual ocean.
We're going to go on up there and we're going to cause some havoc.
How violent do we expect this to get? Note the gusto! Aren't you taking notes?
If you're going to do anything like this, it's really important to have pre-production time to shoot your plates, design the set properly, integrate the lighting, test the look, the colorimetry of the screen versus your camera versus your lenses. All those things play into the finished look because you are creating the finished look live on set. We started working very early on testing curved screens at our facility downtown and all the different combinations we could think of. So we shot plates here locally and we tested grain, resolution, curve of the screen, ambient bounce light, everything we could think of to really put it through its paces before we got on set.
This is one of those shows that took a long time to get created because of the physical challenges and not being able to shoot actually on the seas. So finally, the technology was just starting to get to the point when you could do this type of thing in real time directly on the Warner Brothers lot. And it really made this show possible.
We're swashbuckling. We're looting. Let's have fun with it. Come on.
6 weeks before the show, we went to Puerto Rico and started shooting. We shot a lot of water. Boats with multiple rigs from the shore at multiple times of day. Everything we could think of, day, night, magic hour, inclement weather, sunny weather, all of it, to build a library for the show. What allowed us to do such a high resolution wall with everything at full res, full 20K, was shooting with multiple cameras at 12. So we shot with 5 Blackmagic 12Ks for a total of 60K horizontal resolution in the original photography. And then we brought that to Stargate, stitched it all together, which is quite a job, and split it up into 8K quadrants, put that back through the 8K deck links and resolves, multiple resolves, for full color control on set, full focus control on set, which we have to have. The end result is a full 20K, 160-foot wall that you can look wherever you want with multiple cameras and shoot like you would shoot a comedy, which is long takes, multiple cameras, steady cam, anywhere you look you can shoot. So it's extremely real.
A lot of the guys are sweethearts deep down.
Oh, it's perfect.
They're just dealing with a fair amount of trauma.
What makes Stargate different is that we have a history in camera, in 2D, and that's the way that we approach most of these projects. It's how can this be a photographic result? Not something that's built in a game engine and it may look a little gamey or it needs to be finessed. It's how can we take what is real, literally out there on the sea or out there on some vista or the forest. It is a photographic plate. How can we bring that plate to the set? And that's something that Stargate excels in.
We have a full-size pirate ship that breaks into 3 pieces, designed by Rob Vincent. Fabulous piece of design. So we worked very close in pre-production with Rob to design a volume that would fit the pirate ship Revenge. And then we decided to put the ship on wheels so we could wheel it in and out and create different ships. The English warship and the French warship and all the other ships had to be made out of this ship. So it's a very flexible modular design on not only the physical set, but the LED volume itself and the lighting.
Floggings, keel haulings, and my thought is, why? And also, what if it works like that?
Shy as a shadow, lovely as lace and cold as ice.
The reason we chose virtual production for the solution here is we had done some great work with HBO on Run, where we spent 12 weeks on a train with virtual production, and it was, when you were on that train, it was real. And here we're 14 weeks on a soundstage on ships and islands, and you don't want to be there for that long on green screen. So I think it's a much better experience for actors and directing and camera, because it's in camera. It's a director of photography medium, because you're literally taking what we used to do in post-production, color timing, depth of field, all those things can be done now live on set.
Stargate was fortunate enough on this show and most of our shows to be in charge of content and the on-set playback. So having the knowledge of how one interacts with the other and how to optimize and how to handle media and how to just manage the entire process really situates Stargate toward success on future shows.
It's a wonderful illusion, and I think it brings the magic back to filmmaking in a real-time sense and gets everyone involved, and we're really proud to be part of it.
Back to you.
Well, there you have it. Now you've seen something that nobody else had seen yet. So that was the world premiere of that really nice behind-the-scenes piece you guys did there, Sam. That was terrific. So if you haven't seen Our Flag Means Death, I'm pretty sure you want to now. I apologize, spoiler alert, it wasn't shot on the ocean, so sorry about that. But now you have an idea of how they did it. So when you do see it, I think you will be a little extra amazed, as I was. And heck, I worked on the darn thing. I mean, I shot some of these plates for you. And when I'm watching this at home on an 85-inch 4K TV, I'm like, is that stuff we shot? Because it looks like they were out on the ocean. I mean, it was...
That's the point.
It was impressive.
that is the point. If it doesn't look like you're on the ocean, then we didn't do it right.
Yes. No, it totally sold it. It really, really did. We were talking before about there's kind of two aspects to shooting virtual production. One is shooting the plates, the visual effects plates and things you're going to see in the background, and the other is when you're actually on the set. Oh, by the way, just a little aside here. That interview that we shot on the set of The Revenge with you, we just saw a minute ago, where was that actually on the ship? Mm-mm. It was not.
No, I think virtual production, we've just really opened up the possible uses for it. We're going to see a lot of different things done in real time. I think that UE5 is promising to be, the Unreal Engine 5 is going to change, is a game changer.
Can you just briefly describe what Unreal Engine is for those of us who haven't?
Well, this is what we're seeing here is the blending of the game business and the cinema business. Cinema is largely a flat imaging system. You take a picture of something, it's flat. The game design lives in a 3D world. It's all 3D modeling, rendering, and whatnot, but it has to go at an extreme high frame rate, 24 to 60, to give you but it looks like a game. So at what point is the game engine that can handle this kind of rendering, ray tracing, ambient inclusion, all these exotic things that make something look real? Metahumans.
So that when the camera moves, the background moves in perspective to it.
I mean, when you think of a driving game, you don't think of flat pictures.
Right.
you're not presented with a movie. You're in an environment, a 3D environment. So that's one type of virtual production where you're using a game engine and creating a three-dimensional universe that's out here. This that is behind us is a flat plate. So it's photographic. So can you combine those items? Can you combine the cinema world and the game world, if you will, in such a way that you can mash this thing up, put it with live action, and have it look seamlessly real? Everything that we do has to look real. We're not doing game shows, we're not doing concerts, we're not doing abstract universes, although we can do that. The majority of our business is making things indistinguishable from reality, and perhaps enhanced reality, as you say, where we remix the world and the street lights are a little bit brighter and the clouds are a little bit more perfect and the, hyper real kind of thing. So in the virtual world, that's all possible. And really the question is, can you take what is happening in very high-end games, like if you look at the Matrix Revisited game, it's unbelievable. I mean, and it's all happening in real time, but it's not made for cinema, for shooting cinema. So what we're doing is taking that engine, combining pure 3D with two-dimensional cinematography, and blending it in such a way that it is compositing all that in real time using LED screens, which is a whole nother technology of how higher resolution is your screen. And the design of a virtual volume is a balancing act.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about that some too, that the higher the resolution, the smaller the pitch between the tiny little LEDs on there, the less you're going to see moire with a camera. The closer you can get to the screen before you start seeing anything. And conversely, the greater the pitch, the farther away they are, you've got to get farther away, you're going to start seeing that. What are the implications of that on a stage and when you're building an LED volume? And by the way, LED volume, we call them virtual sets or whatever, LED walls, but volumes, it's kind of the typical term for that.
Well, a volume is an interesting term because you are tracking the volume, generally speaking. So you go to a theater and there's a screen and everybody's sitting in the audience, but the room itself is pretty dumb. It doesn't know where the people are, it doesn't know the volume of this room. You can't see it, but we've got all these tracking cameras up in this room so that we can track anything in this volume. The LED is a living background in that volume, but the volume just says, I'm in a space and I'm aware of everything that's happening in this volume.
So you've got a camera with a device on it and these trackers, and when that camera moves in 3D space, it knows where they are. Right. And in a 3D CGI world, it can change the perspective of that to make that look like an actual 3D image.
Absolutely.
Like we're seeing around things, even though it's on a flat screen.
It can move 2D, it can move 3D, it can change this whole world. And it can also change foreground objects. It doesn't have to be on the wall. So if we want a virtual table here, all we have to do is render it. It's in the foreground. So these cameras will all see a table here. It's occluding us. It's stacking up. We're in the middle, right? But that's also virtual production. That's why I'm saying there's 10,000 recipes you can come up with. If you say, I'm going to do rear projection, or I'm going to do front projection like laser projectors, or I'm going to do LED, or I'm going to do an OLED, 3 OLED monitors. You could argue that those are all virtual production of a type, as long as you're doing it in real time and you're aware of the spatial volume itself. You can do it without tracking, or you can do it with tracking. Just because you have more technology does not mean you have a better solution.
Or that you have to use it.
Just because you have a bigger lens does not mean it's a better lens. Other than it looks good on a magazine cover or something like that. So I think picking the right tool and really understanding the technology allows you to get the best bang for the buck, and it fits your budget. If you're on a little indie film, if somebody says, well, it's $100,000 a day to shoot in my volume, you're out. So if you're on that indie film, can you do virtual production? Absolutely. But it has to cost a few $1,000s a day. So what can you do for a few $1,000s a day using the same technology, but scaling it down to where it works really well?
Can you give me an example of that? Driving shots, maybe?
Yeah, sure. If you put a 14 mil lens on your camera and see the world, you need a big wall for that.
Yeah.
But if you put a 50 mil lens on, you need a little wall for that.
And a wall
Same
could also
shot.
it could be an 85-inch 4K TV,
Sure,
couldn't it?
sure, yeah. We had, for Run, we told HBO to go buy 40 82-inch monitors, and we did a 250-foot long train with 40 4K monitors.
So all the windows of the train were actually monitors?
Yeah. But instead of one 4K giant LED wall, which every window would look like giant pixels, we put 4K pixels outside every window. and
Times
synchronized
40,
it.
yeah.
And it was less expensive, better end result for that particular show. Just a different design. But all you're doing is translating pixels to the camera. So in terms of resolution, if you'll hear people say, what's the pitch of your screen? And that's P 2.8 is what The Mandalorian is, for instance. That's the distance between each individual photo site on that screen. Mm-hmm. And they do put them in like by hand. It's an amazing
Really?
process, yeah. But if you have a 2.8, a 1.4 is twice the resolution of a 2.8, half the distance. So this screen, instead of 4K, would be 8K, same size, but you can work that much closer to it. The rule of thumb is 8 times the pixel pitch is the ideal viewing spot if you're looking at the entire screen, right? If you put a very long lens on, you're looking at a little tiny subsample of that screen. And so you better have good resolution going in, really sharp images. We generally don't shoot things out of focus. We do all our focusing and colorimetry using DaVinci Resolves on set.
So when you're shooting, I'm sorry, when you say we shoot things in focus, you're talking about the plates.
Plates are sharp.
So we're shooting 5, 6, 8, 11?
You want a lens to be sharp at all depth of field wise. You don't want conflicting depths of field.
Right.
You can't have something which is going in and out of focus incorrectly. So we tend to shoot only one plane of focus. And again, the Sigma lenses are great because they're sharp, right? They're very sharp for an edge-to-edge sharp at all stops.
And no chromatic aberration either,
Yeah.
no fringing,
Yeah.
the
So
wide angles are not distorted.
Anything that you, any flaw that you may ingest on the front end is going to be amplified when you put it. It's going to get worse.
Yeah,
It's not going to get better. It's not
especially
going to
on
go
a
away.
165-foot wide screen that's 30
Right.
feet tall. Any
Right.
flaw you will see.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the challenge here is, by the way, CG has no grain at all, has zero grain. And it's really sharp. In fact, we have to put grain on it and tone it down. So if you're blending live action with CG, you better start with a sharp, clean image. You can always degrade it, but it's very difficult to build it back. And so we tried the full range of Sigmas. They all worked. We tended towards the wide end, realistically. The 14 was brilliant on an entire rig. 24 has very little spherical aberration in it, so that in terms of multiples on the rig worked great. And you basically want a really clean lens in whatever if a lens is $1,000 more, you just spent probably $10,000 more if you're going to multiply them. So you really need to be economically conscious of what you're doing, and that goes with data as well. I mean, in 2 weeks of shooting, we came back with 200 terabytes of material, and that was on the Blackmagics, and that was using the
B-RAW.
the B-RAW, which is very efficient.
Yeah.
If we had shot uncompressed RAW, we would have been killed, and it would have choked the pipeline on the backside.
But it had a petabyte of data.
Right. Yeah. So there's this. You have to think it all the way through, and fortunately, again, at Stargate, I've got all the different departments, so I can go to the editors and say, what would you like to work with? And I can go to the visual effects guys and say, how long is it going to take to convert these things from 12 down to, .mov so that we can put them on Frame.io and take a look at them?
Yeah.
And by the way, we're going to have to do a 9-way split. If you're shooting with 9 cameras, how do you look at all 9 at once? So that's another process that all your footage is going to have to be split and comped with all the little data and matching time code stuff so you can trace it back. So it's really, it has to be a complete solution end to end, and you have to know what that is essentially on paper before you even go out and shoot anything. And so we do test lenses, and we test cameras, and we test data, and we test storage, and we test all these things, and you say, well, this one for this job is going to work the best. And it's a unique configuration every time. Every production is different.
Can a cinema, when I say a cinematographer, I mean, what does that mean? Somebody who just out of film school, or somebody who's been shooting for 35 or 40 years, like me and you. But can your typical cinematographer, can they go out and actually shoot visual effects plates for LED volumes and for virtual production, or is that a pretty darn specialized thing, or is this even a fair question to ask?
It's totally fair. Any question is fair. I think anybody can do this. Quite honestly, there's scales. You want to build up to it, but there are a lot of on-ramps onto the virtual production highway. And just because the big shows get all the publicity, I think you really have to be aware that with a couple of TVs that you buy at Best Buy and your cell phone and a laptop computer for playback, you're a virtual production guy, right? I mean, if you're doing it in real time and it looks cool against Rodney Charters shot years of 24 with just monitors outside the car windows, and he just used slightly tighter lenses. So, you can scale it up. You can always get so complicated that here we go to the moon kind of thing. But if you just want to fire off a few rockets in your backyard, anybody can be a rocket scientist at that point. And so I would encourage, everyone in the audience to go out there and try it. And you're in a real-time world. We have cell phones. We have, monitors that are incredibly cheap now. The LCD monitors and whatnot, and they synchronize. You don't have, flicker problems or anything. You can get lights that are very economical to dial them in. And what I tend to do is stand someone in a location and say, okay, Jody, stand there, and I'm shooting now. You step out, and I'm just shooting the background. Then I take that background onto stage. I have a reference of what you really looked like standing there.
To know where to place the camera.
And now I know where to place the camera,
What kind of
how to
lens.
light it,
Yep.
how to light it. You do have to be reasonably good at lighting.
Yes.
You have to understand
No,
lighting.
you have to be way better than reasonably good, because I know you're joking about that, but you're right. The lighting on your subject, it is like green screen work as well.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh, let's just put a strong rim light behind them so the green doesn't bleed onto them, but that does in no way match what's actually on the screen, like the sun wasn't back there, the sun was actually there. It doesn't look realistic at all. And
But
so
that's
it's super important to do.
Shooting green screen and trying to get the lighting right with a background and all this kind of stuff, and not being able to see it for weeks.
It's hard.
Is very difficult. And and you don't always hit it. And many times as a director, you look at the composite and you say, oh, if I'd only just thought about this extra backlight or something. It's shooting on green is like trying to play an instrument without being able to hear the music.
That's a good point.
For 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You hit a note and you go, I hope that's right. Anyway, shooting virtual production on LED or real-time green, real-time blue, you can see it as you're doing it. So now you can hear the music as you're trying to learn how to play the instrument, so that the learning curve for people getting into it is much, much faster. And I think that, and it's much easier. If you can see it, you can look at it and say, I get it. You need more backlight.
Yeah.
Or
Well, it's like that interview we did with you that we showed just a few minutes ago, where you're on the set of The Revenge. Well, we shot that right here.
Yeah.
And we could tell, okay, well, the light is coming from here, so we need to light you that to make it look like you're actually there. That was very
So,
doable.
I think the exciting thing is that the tools are getting more accessible. They're getting less expensive. LED walls, we're all going to have gigantic TVs on our wall in our kitchen, someday, or pretty soon. The COB LEDs that are coming out are a whole nother generation, thinner, flatter, lower power, better color imagery, more durable. So every one of these technologies is accelerating, and they're accelerating towards each other, which is really exciting. This is like 5 railway lines coming in, and they're going to intersect, or they are intersecting. And it's where they're intersecting that is so fascinating, because you have to be aware of cameras, you have to be aware of lighting technology, you have to be aware of game technology, you have to be aware of LED technology, you have to be aware of tracking technology, computers. My new Mac laptop, which we're feeding here, plays 8K no problem, right?
So your laptop is feeding this wall right now?
One generation of laptops changed everything.
It's crazy.
And all of a sudden we're down from. So, as each intersecting technology accelerates and reaches new barriers, the hybrid between them, when you put them all together, is moving incredibly fast forward. And I think that's why virtual production, having the right tools like Sigma lenses and like the Blackmagic gear that we've been using and the Sony gear that we've been using and the Denicky time code and
those were lifesavers.
The Cartoni sticks, amazing. They're all improving.
Yep.
Lighter, faster, cheaper, better.
Yep.
And so virtual production is that ideal intersection of these technologies, and that's really where we're designing. I'm now reading scripts saying, well, we couldn't do that a year ago, but I think by 2023, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're pushing the creative possibilities and solutions much harder. And in many ways, we're designing for equipment that we expect to see at NAB or IBC or Infocom or Showbiz, whatever. It's coming. So you have to. Also, I would highly recommend that everybody stays in touch with the manufacturers, because if you have a company like Sigma that supports you, that you call them up and say, hey, I'm doing this thing and it's never been done and I'm going to try to do this, blah, blah. They're right there with you.
100% agree.
Same thing with Blackmagic.
Those relationships
brilliant.
are vital.
We've had wonderful relations with Arri, Sony, Canon, Blackmagic through all the years.
And to have people that are excited to be alongside you, like, okay, we're doing something that's never been done before.
Ideally,
ideally.
But the other thing I would say is make sure if you're going to do something you've never done before, have a plan B, have a plan C,
point.
Because you're not going to make any friends on set if you get out there and say, oh, we're down for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Really? With the first unit on set, with actors and everybody there, the dependability of these tools is essential. And across the boards, again, you know, we don't use anything that's not dependable, and that you can't trade one 24mm lens to another, to another, to. If you put 9 of them together, do they all look the same?
Yeah, they have to.
So, you know, sounds simple, but start simple and get complex. But don't be afraid to start. Take anything you've got. Start somewhere.
Yes.
Get on the highway, because the sooner you get on, the more fun you're going to have and the more dependable it's going to be.
Amen on that. We do want to make some time for some questions, so if you have questions, you want to put them in the chat or whatever, now would be a really great time to do that. We can address those in a second. Just real quickly before we do, we haven't really talked very much about lighting. And there is something that you have created that is just amazing to me, because there's a misnomer that we're being lit by the screen behind us. You know, that light coming back there, that's clearly from it. No, it's not. There's a light up there. And if the scene is moving and changing, you need to have reactive lighting that's doing the same thing. Can you just address that very, very briefly, how Stargate Studios and your 3View system deals with that?
First of all, we built our own lights, because I couldn't find anything that would, you know. But DMX lighting in general, color changers, you know, the Pro lights right now are really unique in terms of being able to cycle down to 0 and come back in multicolors. You know, they've got 6 LEDs in every light head.
So they're reacting to what's happening beneath them on the screen,
yeah,
right?
it's all pixel tracked.
So when something goes dark or light, that light up there changes. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and for lack of a better word, I'm calling it volumetric lighting, which is to light the volume with much more light than you need, and then have a 360, you know, reference of that we shoot with, you know, like a theta or a Insta360 or something, where you get a complete lighting bulb. So you know exactly where
it's all coming from. Yeah.
You know exactly that there's a car going by and its lights flash over here, and so then all the lights are programmed to mimic the volumetric lighting from the real world.
Yeah, in real time.
And so if you're in a car and you go into a tunnel, it goes dark by itself, right? If a red bus goes by, all the lights turn red on that side, and you get all this beautiful moving light, kinetic light. And ironically, that's where I started on Star Trek. The motion picture was doing kinetic lighting on set for the V'ger sequence.
It has served you well.
And here we are back again, trying to do
years later.
Trying to get it live in camera. But it really does. It's a whole new field, and we need people. I'm looking for artists and people that are interested in doing this from an engineering standpoint, from a you know, every artistic aspect. But we're on set.
Yeah.
And now we're doing visual effects in front of a lot of people. It's like theatrical performance. So a lot of practice.
It needs to all go right every single time.
And if it does, then you wind up with Our Flag Means Death.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do we have questions? Asking off camera here, they're going to supply something to us. By the way, our friend Roy Wagner, ASC, cinematographer, buddy of ours, who we've worked with
Roy,
a lot.
I know you're out there somewhere.
Yes, loves the Sigma lenses. He has used them extensively. We used them on a feature film a few years ago, and great products. So shout out to Roy and Sigma. Yeah. Alrighty, so we've got a couple of questions here for some folks. This would be for you, Sam. In fact, all of these are for you, Sam. Okay. I can make up answers, but I think his answers will be better than mine. How would you go about shooting a film in the desert using virtual production if you're unable to actually go to the desert to get assets? And you've done this.
Yeah, we have. Well, you have to go to the desert. If you can't go to the desert to shoot plates either, then you would build it in a game engine entirely. And ironically, a desert landscape is pretty easy to build in Unreal. So you could build it 100%, or you could build a hybrid where you can ingest stock footage of cactuses and skies and a bunch of really cool stuff, probably out of Arizona. And you can use that to build a hybrid world where it's partially 3D and partially 2D, or you can jump in a car and go out with a friend to the desert and shoot plates, which most people can do. You know, take a weekend, and I've done that a bunch, and it's great. You go out and you shoot. Now the advantage to a game engine is that you can relight it You can change the lighting in that game engine in real time versus having it baked in into a photographic plate. But the fastest turnaround is jump in a car with the best camera you can get your hands on and go shoot like panoramas, static lock-off stitches, then bring them back, stitch them together, and now you've got a 180-degree view that, because you want to be able to move in that world a little bit. You don't necessarily, but it's like shooting a movie without actors. You can block it. You can stand there and say, if I had all my actors here, this is the shot I'd want. Well, fine, just shoot the background. Then go onto a virtual stage and put people in.
Yeah. Well, when you're shooting in the desert, of course, most of the time the sky is going to be blue. It's going to be cloudless. If you're shooting on the ocean, you've got lots of clouds moving on. So shooting multiple cameras at the same time is really important, because if you shoot this way and then you pan this way and then you pan this way, the clouds have all moved. And when you try to stitch those shots together, the clouds are going to be at different positions. So that's a big part of why we chose to shoot 180 or 360 at the same time.
The beauty of the desert is there's not a whole lot moving around.
Exactly.
So
Pretty
you
still.
could do it with stills.
You could do that.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah,
that
with
you could do
stills, you actually could.
You could just take an iPhone, take a decent camera, and just go click, click, and do any stitching program, Photoshop. I do a lot of work in stills. I preview it, figure it out in stills. Motion picture is just 24 stills per second.
Right.
So if you can make it work on one frame and go, wow, that looks really pretty cool. I put somebody on green screen, or I put them in front of an LED wall, or, block it out, figure it out with stills. It will give you the vision, the lighting, the technique, everything, and then just make it move.
That's good. Another person asks, what was the decision to shoot real plates versus using or creating a CG environment? When would you do one versus the other?
Well, and we certainly talked about a CG. CG water is tough.
It is. It doesn't look real most of the time, does it?
I mean, given enough horsepower and time, it looks real. But that's the big maybe, right? We only had 6 weeks, and a lot of that was taken up with location scouting and prepping and all that kind of stuff. So the dependable, surefire trick was to go, if we're trying to make it look real, let's go get reality. Then the challenge became, how do you put it up on a 20K wall? And for those who have tried to render water at 4K, it's tough. How about rendering water at 20K? It wouldn't happen. And the different variety, the different time of the day. And remember, in 2 weeks, we shot enough material for all the entire series of the show. So, the quantity of material that we could get quickly that would look real, that would fill the wall edge to edge with full resolution, give us a lot of variety and give us dependability at a price. It had to be live action.
Yeah, makes sense. Another question, how do you go about tracking your camera with date and positions within your set when using virtual production? Yeah. So metadata, I guess we're talking about.
A lot of different ways to track a camera in volumetric space, XYZ. You can use the MOSIS system, which has tracking marks. Michael Geisler has done a fantastic job at really being one of the more predominant motion trackers in the business, similar to Red Spy, but they require targets. There's inertial guidance, which is on every cell phone, particularly Apple's. There's the T265 sensors that we have built, trackers that have a combination of creating a point cloud and inertia. This is all about how can you track an object in 3D space. What we used on our flag, because of the size of the volume, was OptiTrack cameras. We put up 30 cameras on the set, and then you have active trackers on the cameras, and it tells all the computers where the cameras are in physical space, and the screens adjust. We started with Vives, right? A Vive is a very good tracker. It's a limited play space, but it's a very good tracker. So I would say for all of you who are getting into this, start with a Vive. Go get a Vive. If you can get a Vive working with Unreal, you will be in the virtual production space.
That's good. I'm thinking, do we have any more? Yes, we have. Yes, one more question. Thank you very much. Okay, and this is interesting. Are you using anamorphic lenses with virtual sets? Because obviously some movies are going to shoot anamorphic.
Sure.
Do you use them to shoot the plates?
We don't use anamorphic to shoot the plates.
Because of distortion, or
No. You can, but then you have to de-squeeze it to put it on a wall. So I would rather, the selection of lenses are so good in spherical lenses, the Sigmas, good example. If you're going to put a 9-camera rig together to shoot circle vision, you're talking about 9 times, a high-end Cook lens or a Arri anamorphic. I mean, you better have a really good producer to figure that out.
as well as something that's going to be able to manage all that weight and size.
We're after sharpness. We're after like pin sharp.
Right.
The Sigmas with a letterbox give us any anamorphic we want, and then we squeeze it after the fact. We don't want anamorphic lens flares and all that kind of cool stuff that you get with anamorphic. So if you're not going to go to the lens flares, and you're not going to be dealing with a very shallow depth of field, because we want deep depth of field, there is no reason to shoot the plates in anamorphic. That said, when we compress it all together, you can create an anamorphic squeeze and then de-squeeze onto a big volume, which is another great trick. So we use anamorphic, but at the end of the day, that world has to be spherical. That's just flat. That wants to look absolutely real. The best impression of reality we can get. What shoots us can be anything. Can be anamorphic, and our depth of field, the characteristics of anamorphic lenses, all those beautiful things that happen on the taking end on set. They don't happen in creating the virtual assets.
Yep, that's good. I think that's clear. Well, I think that's about it, kids. Thank you for joining us. We hope this was informative. You'll be able to see this live stream if you didn't catch all of it. It'll be archived. You can see it on Sigma. You'll be able to see it at Red Shark News or maybe other places out there. It's on Facebook, of course. So thanks for joining us. And also just another little kind of cool shout out. Everybody's been waiting for a long time for Top Gun to be released. And our friend Claudio Miranda, ASC, shot that using, yes, thank you very much, Sigma lenses. So it'll be cool to see that shot with this glass as well. So hope you enjoyed this, Sam. It's always a pleasure being with you.
You bet.
And happy virtual shooting or otherwise. Take care.